Hello and welcome back to Hyperplay RPG. In 2024 we played 7 classic RPGs and we're going to rank them for you. Not only that, we're going to rate them, and not only that, we're going to score them out of 100% in the old magazine style. And our first classic offering, the first game we played this year, was Dragon Quest V, Hand of the Heavenly Bride, on the DS. Now, this is widely regarded as one of the classic JRPGs, a sacred text considered by many to be the best Dragon Quest. And it features not only in our 1001 video games to play before you die book, which used to be our Bible for video games, but also Hardcore Gaming 101's 200 video games of all time, 200 best video games of all time. So we were rightly excited to get involved with Dragon Quest V, and yeah, we played the DS iteration, as you can see it looks absolutely beautiful, and the early dungeons, including this little ghosty one, were very exciting. But this game is very much an RPG of its time, innovative for its time, because you could co-opt monsters into your party and battle with them. Very useful they were too, having a wagon full of monsters you could swap in and out. And there was a sweeping narrative that hadn't been seen before in RPGs spanning multiple generations. We won't go into too many details, but the game is an RPG of contradictions. Yes, you have this sweeping narrative, but the characterization seems somewhat underbaked. And yes, it's innovative in terms of having the monster co-opting, but with all the other great characters around, you can't actually get them into your party. Often you're saddled with just the monsters, and there's very little you can do to develop them, apart from just have them battle, and auto-battle at that. So yeah, a game of contradictions, a vast sweeping narrative, albeit with characters that are underdeveloped, and long dungeons, lots of grinding, difficulty spikes if you're not prepared. And if you are prepared, you'll find yourself spamming attack, just like against these great dragons here. You would think that they would offer a big old challenge, but no, just spam away with your small party and a couple of monsters in there, and you grind your way through. And of course, yes, the last dungeon, we were desperate for the game to end. Come the traditionally purgatory last dungeon experience. So Dragon Quest V, hopes were very high, but we did find it to be, in hindsight, rather overrated, in the same way that we did when we recently came to Suikoden 2, after all the hype that's been getting. We could see that Dragon Quest V would benefit from the quality of life improvements that Dragon Quest III HD 2D has recently received, such as speeding up the combat, and here's hoping that Dragon Quest V will get that treatment. So 82% for Dragon Quest V. Moving on swiftly to Lufia 2, another game where you can co-opt monsters into your party, and another game that is rather light on characterization. It's Lufia 2, so perhaps the developers expected you to have played Lufia 1, because Lufia 1 is a sequel, so perhaps they expect you to know a bit more about the characters who are already in Lufia 2, and there is a bit of a surprise for those who don't know what happens in Lufia 1. There's a bit of a surprise at the end of Lufia 2, which we're not going to spoil, although we did admittedly use a guide to get through some of Lufia 2's dungeons, and in the course of looking at that guide we did manage to spoil the surprise at the end of the game, but never mind. And Lufia 2 is another great looking game. In fact, all the games on this list of 7 classic RPGs are beautiful. It came out at the end of the SNES's life cycle in about 1995 or 1996 in the PAL or Western regions. And it's a great mashup of JRPG with Zelda-esque puzzles in the dungeon. So if you like that kind of thing, pushing blocks around onto switches to open doors, using arrows to stun monsters or flick switches, and impossibly tall towers that you have to navigate endlessly, then this could be your thing. But do bear in mind it goes town dungeon till the cows come home. You might get to the top of a tower, get your party all set up, finally think that you've made it, up to the door, and yep, it's shut. And then you have to go and find out why it's shut. And if you're not big into dungeon exploring in RPGs, then perhaps Lufia 2 will not be your thing. So please do bear that in mind. What we would say, however, is that Lufia 2 has something quite extraordinary hiding within it, and that is the Ancient Cave. Now, the Ancient Cave is an optional 99-floor, randomly, procedurally generated dungeon, whereby you can go down each floor, fight battles, pick up some great equipment, and scarper with that equipment, which can really help you for the rest of the game. But it is a bit of a gamble, because if you do happen to die in the Ancient Cave, you lose all the extras, all the extra goodies that you've got there. So yeah, Lufia 2, great for those of you who love a bit of grinding and love a big old dungeon. Not too long either, you'll be able to see everything within about 30 hours, although we must say that come the end, given the somewhat weak characterization and repetitive gameplay and the dungeonitis, we were quite happy for the game to finish. Lufia 2 scores 85%. From one classic JRPG with massive dungeons to another classic JRPG with massive dungeons, albeit one that came out a good 20 years later. And this is, of course, Persona 5, particularly Persona 5 Royal, which we played on the Switch. Now, when we started off this game, we thought, yeah, absolutely, Persona 5 Royal does live up to all the hype lavished upon it and its immense popularity. 10 million copies sold now of Persona 5 in its various forms, which is a phenomenal amount when you consider that something like Final Fantasy VI, across all these years, has only sold about 4 million copies. Anyway, back to Persona 5. Yeah, so walking around Yongen-Jaya at the start, in the rain, all the slice of life goodness of exploring Tokyo, the back streets in Tokyo, it was so realistic and took us right back to the time that we spent in Jiugaoka, way back in the early 2000s. And yeah, nothing much has changed. It is exactly like that, incredibly realistic. And going around, meeting your confidence in the streets, leveling them up, and then going forwards from that and fusing your demons, your persona. Absolutely fantastic. Thoroughly enjoyed the gameplay loop at the start. Absolutely gorgeous, of course. I mean, it goes without saying, everyone waxes lyrical about the presentation, and rightly so. Fantastic style. Great anime cinematics as well thrown in there, and it runs great on the Switch. And that is how we played it. But the formula wore thin. After about 30 to 40 hours, we were looking forward to getting to the end game and thought we were getting there. And really, the game should have ended on the arc. Now, for those who haven't played it, we're not going to say any more. We didn't understand particularly why Kasumi got so much time until right at the end. But by that point, we'd absolutely had our fill of Persona 5. It needed to finish earlier. It needed a jolly good editing. Yes, the story is good. The writing is weak. The characters are pretty boring, and certainly in terms of their dialogue, what they've got to say is pretty boring. Ryuji is what the kids, maybe not the kids, or maybe people slightly younger than me call, Ryuji's a bad hang. He's a bad hang. He is a whiny, well, no, I'm not gonna not gonna use various cuss words. He's just not a great character to be around. All his negativity and getting cross all the time. Yeah, not very impressed with the writing in Persona 5, got to say. Style over substance. It's got some great aspects, it just needs to be tightened up. And the royal aspect of adding in still another dungeon at the end, and the clever moral quandary therein, but by that point the game had lost us, completely lost us. I have to say, running around a school, having a chat to various people, moaning about their life, waiting for the clock to tick down. Mementos was okay. It was good that you could get in and out of it fairly quickly. Nothing like the torture of Tartarus in Persona 3. Just didn't find it that fun in the end. Being asked questions in school that we were expected to know the answer to, but there was no way of knowing what the correct answer was, and then getting it wrong and feeling like we were penalised for that. Part-time jobs, fulfilling menial tasks, this kind of busy work, it doesn't excite us. I know that there's a market for the game out there, obviously. 10 million people can't be wrong. But yeah, Persona 5, over-bloated in its systems, and it did bring to mind the old adage, if you want a good story, read a good book. There are great RPG stories. This isn't one of them, 86%. These days, when people talk about great stories in RPGs and world building, well, there's often only one place to start, and that is the Trails in the Sky franchise. And what a franchise it now is, 13 mainline RPGs at the last count, we believe. And we played Trails in the Sky first chapter on PSP. You might know it's being remade for modern systems, coming out next year, which is going to be a fully realised 3D overhaul. Thoroughly enjoyed the PSP version, however. It's got absolutely beautiful, look at the fire effects there, and the clean textures and the deep reds and browns. Very colourful, very beautiful. A natural progression, we thought, from Final Fantasy VI's sprite work. And yeah, definitely something that we enjoyed sinking our teeth into. And there is a lot to sink your teeth into with Trails in the Sky first chapter. It is long-winded. There is a lot of yakking. In fact, when we were looking for footage of the game, it took ages to find a battle. Going through the gameplay, the long play of the game, there is a lot of this to and fro between Joshua and Estelle, and whilst it's kind of cute to start off with, it does wear a little bit thin. However, we can forgive it because it's setting the scene for the best part of another 12 games. Trails in the Sky was a lot of fun. Good battle mechanics when you do get to the battles, which we'll see very shortly. Got some good area of effect spells and damages, and there's a tactical element as well, a very light tactical element. We're not huge into SRPGs, getting your party around the grid, but it's definitely something to pay attention to the reach of one's weapons in Trails in the Sky. However, there is a lot of walking around empty dungeons and a lot of walking between points on the map, so that is something to bear in mind. It is a game whereby you just have to accept you're going to have to take your time. You're going to have to go up floor after floor of tower, trying to find a treasure chest or just the route to the summit. And we've sped up the footage here 2 times, but you kind of get the idea that this is a game that requires patience. But give it the patience it requires and you'll be thoroughly rewarded with an excellent world, a great story, some lovely twists, particularly at the end, which set you up for the next game. Just be ready to walk and talk a lot. And when you finally found your way out of all those merry mazes, you get to do such exciting things as speak to border guards and, yes, fill out paperwork. Fortunately, it's only a few button presses, but very curious. And here's that battle system. And this was a real high point of the game. You've got your turn order on the left, and your party members can rise through the ranks of that turn order if you choose a particular spell to delay the enemy, like Flicker there that Joshua's using. It delays the enemy and causes impressive area of effect damage in a straight line. Then you've got the other spells that you can do splash damage, and you've got all the buffs. We really enjoyed the battle system in Trails in the Sky first chapter. In fact, we kind of wish that there were more battles. A little less conversation and a little more action, please. But we hear that there's going to be good things ahead in Trails in the Sky second chapter, which we will visit on a future update on this channel. Another way Trails in the First mixes up the battle system is that you often have escort missions, such as this blue-haired chap here, who you have to protect while he wanders around being completely useless. If his health gets to 0, then it's game over. So fortunately there was a miss there, otherwise would have been in big trouble. So there we are, yeah, Trails in the First, highly recommended. Just be sure to set aside a lot of time and quite a lot of patience. Trails FC starts well and ends well, but sags in the middle, and there's a good 50 hours to sink your teeth into here. But it is the first game on this list that we were in no way disappointed by. So, a feather in the cap for Trails, which scores a whopping 88%, and the promise of great things to come. And speaking of great things to come, we have Tengai Makyou 0, a Super Famicom RPG released in Japan in 1995 and subsequently translated into English by the fan community, and that happened in the last few years. And we've got David Vink to thank for turning us on to Tengai Makyou Zero. Do check out David Vink's YouTube channel. The USP for Tengai Makyou Zero is you put in the time and date in the real world, and then in-game events will reflect the time and date in the real world with different festivals and different shops open and various other great bits and pieces. So a bit of a gimmick, and does rather rely on you playing the game for a full year of real time. So for, from January 2025 to December 2025, for instance, if that's what you were going to do, if you really wanted to see all that the game has to offer. You don't have to do that, but it just goes to show that that's quite a unique concept for the era. A little bit of a gimmick, but it did have a big benefit, and that is that dungeons are mercifully tight in this game. They are small, they are compact, they don't take much time. We would say they're perfectly formed. As you may have gathered, as we've gone through this list, huge, rambling, seemingly endless dungeons are not our cup of tea. In Tengai Makyou Zero, they're very well focused, they don't outstay their welcome, and they're thoroughly enjoyable. The visuals are stunning. Tengai Makyou Zero is one of the most beautiful looking games on the Super Famicom, and this spinning sword sequence of the sword being thrown into the abyss is something Stanley Kubrick would be proud of. So we can heartily recommend Tengai Makyou Zero, and beyond the stunning effects like the snowstorm there, you've also got fast travel, way ahead of its time, to be able to zip around the map, which again is probably another consequence of the personal live game system time mechanic, because you'll need to be able to zip around and get between all the festivals at different times. There are old hermits tucked away in caves to give you super secret special spells. No wonder Tengai Makyou Zero made our RPG top 10 games of all time. We even got an English box manual and map printed, fully deserving of 90%. Now, Xenoblade Chronicles 3 is also deserving of a good score, but it's a funny one because it's not the best story in the Xenoblade franchise. That would go to Xenoblade Chronicles 1. It doesn't have the best battle system. That would go to Xenoblade Chronicles 2. It's far from the tightest Xenoblade Chronicles game, because that would go to Torna the Golden Country, the spin-off from Xenoblade Chronicles 2, which is actually a good place to start in and of itself because it's a much shorter game. However, Xenoblade Chronicles 3 is an epic adventure. We would say, again, like Persona 5, the writing here is not what it could be, and that has been a bit of a problem since Xenoblade Chronicles 2. They have curious writing practices at Monolith Soft. For instance, in Xenoblade Chronicles 2, there's one set of writers did the odd numbered chapters, and another set of writers did the even numbered chapters, and that's going to lead to clear dissonance. And again, we do think that this particular entry in the franchise could have been better written. That said, the premise is superb. These guys fighting for their future with their recurring lives and trying to work out just what the hell is going on. And it's beautiful. And there are great areas to explore, although we would say the exploration was better done in Xenoblade Chronicles 1. The biomes in particular are more exciting there. But where Xenoblade Chronicles 3 absolutely triumphs is its job class system. It was so much fun picking up the different characters, learning their jobs, and then being able to tailor your party the way you wanted. I'm a sucker for a good job class system, and this one had one of the absolute best. Decent story, good locations, solid combat, and a world-class job system. Xenoblade Chronicles 3 definitely deserves 91%. And we come to it at last. Not only the best RPG I've played this year, but easily one of the best I've played since Final Fantasy VI, way back in 1994. Chained Echoes is that good and can be held up in that kind of company. We've talked about Chained Echoes before in a couple of our previous videos, but on reflection, no game gives you dopamine hit after dopamine hit like Chained Echoes. Everything is rewarded with something impactful and meaningful. If you find an out-of-the-way treasure chest, you can be sure it has something good. You defeat particularly tricky enemies you'll get lots of SP to go into your character pool so that you can get extra spells that actually mean something and help you in the battles ahead. Time after time, this game rewards you in a way that few others do, and we've got all the nods to classic JRPGs. It is in its own way derivative and hugely influenced, but is also somehow very much its own thing. You have floating islands, you have airships, you have mechs, you have base building like Suikoden, you even have side quests which not only give you more background to your existing characters, but will give you all new party members to use for the battles ahead. Chained Echoes is absolutely spectacular and wears its influences proudly on its sleeve and is deserving of the whopping 95% that we bestow upon it. If you love your JRPGs, you owe it to yourself to play Chained Echoes, and if you're going to play one game in 2025, make sure it is Chained Echoes. And there we have it, 7 classic JRPGs. Now if you do enjoy a long dungeon, then you can probably add another 5% to the first 3 games on this list. Anyway, thanks for watching, and if you did enjoy this video, you know what to do. Please save your progress and be sure to load up your Hyperplay RPG save file in the new year. Take care, happy RPGing, and see you in 2025.